Good morning, everyone. It's good to see you. I'm glad to have you worship with us today. Good morning online. We are so pleased that you could join us there too. I'll start by a quick prayer. Lord, we give you thanks for your word. We give thanks for this opportunity to come together and to listen what you might have to say. Will you speak in the name of Jesus? Amen. I'll wait a bit. Prepared a great PowerPoint. There we are. This is us. We're coming to the end of a sermon series exploring who we are as a church. And over the past couple of weeks, we've been looking at our vision and values, and that we are a growing community of whole life disciples, being alert to God's leading, paying careful attention to one another and the moment that we're in, so that we can be good news to those around us. Sometimes life can be everything you want it to be. It's sunshine and roses, and it's glorious and it's nice. Other times the fangs of the pains of life dig really, really deep, and we can get overwhelmed. And in today's passage, it's the same. 1 minute, there's this gently soft south wind, and the next is a violent storm. Part of being a follower of Jesus is to recognize the moment that we're in and seeing how God might want to use us in it. Some of us find ourselves in the eye of the storm right now. Toxic work culture. It's really hard at home caring for a dependent, and it's depleting. Chronic pain might just be getting a bit exhausting. Or you might have looked at the news and just think, oh, this is all so overwhelming. Do you sometimes feel powerless and hopeless in your own situation? Or even when you look at other people's situation and you just don't know how you can make a difference to them. I'd like to tell you a story about Paul, who recognized the moment that he was in and was used by God in it to make a difference for the sake of others. The story is from the book of Acts, chapter 27. The book of Acts is just a recount of the early church and how the good news of Jesus spread from Jerusalem all the way to Rome. And Paul had been imprisoned by the Romans, awaiting trial, because he'd been spreading that good news. And it had been determined he's going to Rome, he's going to go in front of Caesar. And basically, who's believed to be the writer of the book of Acts, Luke, and another guy called Aristarchus of Macedonia, they were with Paul at the time. They'd voluntarily agreed to join him on this quite dangerous journey to Rome to support him. And they found themselves on a grain ship. That's probably not how it looked, but that's the only one I could find that resembled it. And they were on this Alexandrian grain ship bound for Italy. And on this ship were 276 people in total. You had Paul, Luke, Aristarchus, and then you would have had the crew of sailors. There was a guy called Julius. He was a Roman centurion, his soldiers, and a bunch of prisoners that the soldiers were in charge of. And they'd had already a difficult journey behind them, and they went to a place called Fair Havens. Now, Fair Havens was this boring place, and nothing really exciting was happening there. But most importantly, it wasn't suitable for wintering. Oh, yes. It wasn't suitable for wintering, so against Paul's advice, Julius and the sailors said, right, we're off to Phoenix, it's a big city, it's going to be really exciting to spend winter there. Well, well, well. A storm came rushing in. And I want you to picture it in a ship like this, in a big violent storm. The boat is shaking. They're trying everything. They're loading off valuable cargo off the boat, equipment off the boat to make it lighter. No navigation because they haven't seen the sun and the stars in a while. That's how they navigated. That wasn't there. They haven't eaten, probably a bit seasick, and quite exhausted. And it's in this moment that Paul all of a sudden stands up and encourages the people, because an angel of God had appeared to him and had assured him of his own destiny, but also the fate of the other sailors that were with him, or the people on that boat. But it was utterly hopeless. But then, after the encouragement, a bit later on, all of a sudden they realized they were close to some land, finally some hope. And Paul giving them another little boost, they were encouraged and they got ready. The ship got wrecked and all of them were saved, just as Paul had told him. Paul was as helpless and powerless as all the other people on that boat. And yet he was able to offer them a different story. And I would like to highlight 3 aspects of that story to you today, of how we can notice the moment we might be in and what God might be asking of us. So Julian, if you would like to come and read the first passage to us. Oh, look, I've missed all these.
So the first reading is from Acts 27, verses 21 to 25. After they had gone a long time without food, Paul stood up before them and said, "Men, you should have taken my advice not to sail from Crete. Then you would have spared yourselves this damage and loss. But now I urge you to keep up your courage, because not one of you will be lost. Only the ship will be destroyed. Last night an angel of the God to whom I belong and whom I serve stood beside me and said, 'Do not be afraid, Paul. You must stand trial before Caesar, and God has graciously given you the lives of all who sail with you. So keep up your courage, men, for I have faith in God that it will happen just as he told me.'"
Firstly, a moment of encouragement. And that ties in nicely with Ian's sermon last week of noticing when we can be an encouragement to other people. But I would also say that it's noticing and recognizing when we might need encouragement. It would have been really hard for Paul to not recognize the mess and the chaos that they were in. And it's quite remarkable to think that he stood up on this shaking boat and he was able to encourage all these other people. How? How was Paul able to do that? Because the circumstances weren't particularly encouraging. It wasn't some cruise luxury liner, a nice sea day ready for your shore excursion in Phoenix. It was far from that. There was the lost cargo, there was the lost equipment, and nowhere was the storm ceasing anytime soon. And it can be the same for us sometimes. We can look at our lives, the circumstances, or the circumstances of those close to us, and we feel, oh, it's just not very encouraging. Or we might look at the news, the political chaos, and you think, it's not going to stop anytime soon. So how was Paul able to stand there and encourage the others? "For this very night, an angel of the God to whom I belong whom I serve, stood before me and said, "Stop being afraid, Paul. You must stand before Caesar. And behold, God has granted you the lives of all those sailing with you." Paul wasn't just wishfully thinking. He had a word from God. A bit like what Neil preached a couple of weeks ago, he was alert to the Spirit of God and noticed and received the encouragement that he was given by God and was able to pass that encouragement on to other people. God hadn't just assured him of his own destiny, but of that of the others too. And we too can seek assurance from God when we feel down, when we feel in a ditch. And sometimes we can notice when other people might need it, and we can encourage them. On Monday morning, I made the mistake of going out for a run. And about halfway through, it just started pouring. And I reached a point of what my friend Joe would call terminal wetness. You can't get any more soaked than you already are. And I ran, and there was this guy, and he passed me, and he'd reached maximum wetness too. And then I saw him again, and I thought, okay, I'm going to put in Ian's sermon into practice. I'm going to encourage this guy. And I was like, "You're doing really well, keep going." And he was like, "Yeah, cheers," and kept on. But the remarkable thing was, as soon as I'd passed him, my steps became lighter. I got a little boost, because I needed the encouragement as much as the next person in terminal wetness running around the quays. Let us acknowledge and receive the encouragement when we need it. And also notice when somebody else might need it too. And just a good "you're doing really well" can mean the world to somebody else. Like Ian said last week, let us be a source of encouragement to others. Let us be a Barnabas to somebody else, whatever circumstance that you might find yourself in. Look, how nice. Encourage people of what can be. Point 2, a moment to care. Julian.
So the second reading is chapter 27 and verses 33 to 38. Just before dawn, Paul urged them all to eat. "For the last 14 days," he said, "you've been in constant suspense and have gone without food. You haven't eaten anything. Now I urge you, take some food. You need it to survive. Not one of you will lose a single hair from his head." After he said this, he took some bread and gave thanks to God in front of them all. Then he broke it and began to eat. They were all encouraged and ate some food themselves. Altogether, there were 276 of us on board. When they'd eaten as much as they wanted, they lightened the ship by throwing the grain into the sea.
Paul noticed that they hadn't eaten for 14 days. If I don't get breakfast, I get a little bad-tempered. 14 days without food. No wonder they had lost all hope. But Paul noticed that they needed physical food. They needed the physical care to be able to survive. And it's in this moment that he offers something quite simple. He just offers them bread. He recognized that they needed the physical strength for the next bit. He noticed that this moment on that ship wasn't over yet. There was still work to be done. Throwing the leftover cargo in, cutting the anchor lines, and then swimming or grabbing onto a plank to get to shore. Physical strength was required, and Paul knew that. And Paul simply offered them bread. And doesn't it sound familiar? He took bread and gave thanks to God in front of all of them. He broke it and he began to eat it. Now that symbolism might have been lost on the other people on the boat, but it was an act of faith in God's grace, in God's provision. And think about it. It was Paul not only caring about his own survival, but the survival of all the others. He wasn't just caring about the survival of him and maybe his two friends, if he was generous. No, he wanted to, and he cared for all of their survival, including the Romans who had imprisoned him. Then all of them were encouraged and they ate, and their spirits were improved. And it seems like an obvious point is noticing what somebody else might physically need and providing that to somebody. Even offering something as simple as a cup of tea can be a huge blessing. And we can do that in our everyday lives. I've noticed it this morning already, Jill offering tissues to Sarah, or Jumi fixing Anne's collar at the back. Offering a lift like Shirley was saying. I read this morning in a devotional from Johnny Erickson Tada, and it just fits so nicely, and I wanted to read it to you. Such ordinary deeds do not seem like kingdom work. But if you sense even the slightest pressure to lend a hand, you can be certain it is the King who is pressing you into his service. Isn't that beautiful? He cares. We can be the hands and feet of Jesus to people around us in simple acts. In Rosie giving us really nice labels for the tea and coffee station, what a blessing that is. Whatever little thing we can do can have a huge impact on somebody else. Why? Because it shows them that they're loved. It shows them that they're cared for. Paul offering something as simple as a piece of bread to a group of exhausted people was a source of good news to them. Last point, a moment of unity. Julian, please.
Final reading, verses 30 to 32 and then 42 to 44. In an attempt to escape from the ship, the sailors let the lifeboat down into the sea, pretending that they were going to lower some anchors from the bow. And Paul said to the centurion and the soldiers, "Unless these men stay with the ship, you cannot be saved." So the soldiers cut the ropes that held the lifeboat and let it drift away. The soldiers planned to kill the prisoners to prevent any of them from swimming away and escaping. But the centurion wanted to spare Paul's life and kept them from carrying out their plan. He ordered those who could swim to jump overboard first and get to land. The rest were to get there on planks or any other pieces of the ship. In this way, everyone reached land safely.
They were finally close to land. Finally, there was hope of making it from this chaotic mess they were in alive. The sailors were ready. They were ready to seize the opportunity to make off and save themselves. But Paul noticed. And he said to the centurion and the soldiers, "Unless those guys stay on the ship, you won't be saved." They needed each other, and so do we. We need each other. It's the same when the soldiers were thinking of killing off all the prisoners, because if they made off and they didn't bring the prisoners alive, then their life could be on their chopping board. And it's this time God using the centurion to prevent that from happening. It's in this desperate situation of a near shipwreck that in this crucial moment, God is using Paul and the centurion to keep them together, because that's what was needed for all of them to be saved. And we need each other too, especially when the waves of life can get a bit rough. When we are committed to one another, when we edify one another, when we serve one another, when we sharpen one another, this journey called life gets a lot easier, and it becomes more enjoyable too. A couple of weeks ago, I skipped house group. I had no excuse. I just couldn't be bothered. But the next Sunday, I had Neil, Martin, and Anne come up to me and say, "We missed you on Thursday." And Anne gave me a little extra nudge and say, "Make sure you come next time." The wrath of Anne. They cared that I wasn't there. They did. And not only did they show me such love, they graciously held me accountable too. It matters, because we're poorer without each other. And being together helps us to grow spiritually. It helps us to live out our faith in our everyday lives. And often, and most likely, there will be times in life where we will face challenges that we can't go through on our own. There will be moments where we need encouragement. There will be moments where we need people standing alongside each other, where we need people that care physically for us. And sometimes we can be that somebody to somebody else who might need that. We can offer that. And in a moment after I conclude, there will be a moment for you to be prayed with. So if you're feeling powerless and hopeless in your own situation, or maybe you feel powerless and hopeless to be able to help other people, it's a moment to just notice the moment you are in and have somebody stand alongside you and pray with you. Acts 27 finishes, and so it was that all of them were brought to safety. Paul, a person with no power, no position, no resources on that boat, was able to recognize the moment he was in. He was able to receive encouragement from God and noticed a moment when he could encourage others, when he noticed that they needed physical strength and providing practical help, and recognizing the moment where they needed to be together. Paul, a person with nothing in that moment, was able to do that. And the ship was destroyed, but all 276 passengers on board made it out of that alive. It's miraculous. Absolutely miraculous. And that can still happen today. It's not necessarily that we'll all avoid the storm, or that we can guarantee that there won't be pain or sorrow in it. But Jesus' presence is with us there, and we can come together. We can be encouraged. We can care physically for others in these moments, because God uses us in that. God uses people like you and I, people who might not have power, who might not have position, who might not have resources, to make a difference. And that is the moment we are in.